Hi there, I'm Lara from 5 out of 4 Patterns and welcome to Sewing School. Today we're talking about bias tape. In fact, we're talking about learning how to make bias tape. So let's start and let's talk about bias tape. There are two different kinds of bias tape. You have single fold bias tape, which you can look at this here. Okay, this is single fold bias tape. Then there's double fold bias tape, which looks like this, but if you open it up, it looks just like the single fold bias tape. So that's the thing. Double fold bias tape is simply single fold bias tape folded in half and pressed. That's it. That's double fold bias tape. Now, when do we use bias tape? Now, single fold bias tape, I don't use hardly at all, to be really honest. It's great for decorative things, like maybe to put a stripe around a skirt or a sleeve or something. But it really I don't really use it often at all. But it's nice to have on hand just in case you want something fun. Double fold bias tape, I actually use quite a bit. We could use it as for hems, say on a pair of woven pants or a woven skirt or even sleeves to a woven shirt. You can use your bias tape, your double fold bias tape there. What's so great about double fold bias tape is the way that it handles curves. Because it has a little bit of stretch, because it's cut on the bias, it's helpful to do necklines or to go around some other kind of curve that you have. So let's learn how to make it. The first thing we need is something to make the bias tape with. Now, you do not have to have this. You do not have to make your bias tape with these little bias tape makers, but they do make life a whole lot easier. I got this kit, and it's really nice because it's all self-contained. There we go. And it's got multiple things. Now, the biggest thing and the most important thing in here are these right here. These are your bias tape makers. Aren't they beautiful? So they come in different sizes. What they do is they help you to make single fold binding. So you'll use them to make single fold and then you'll fold that in half to make double fold. Now obviously you're not going to use this tiny one here for a double fold binding, so we're not even going to look at that one right now. That would just simply be for a single fold. But you could use, this would be a tiny double fold. I would barely use that, but it is there to use. And then we've got the two biggest ones. I use this one, the 1-inch one, most often because 1/2-inch bias tape is my jam. I make that a lot, and so we'll need to use, because it's folded in half and it makes single fold, when you fold it in half, it's a 1/2 inch. When it's single fold, it's 1 inch. Okay, so when it's double fold, it's a 1/2 inch. So you'll need the 1-inch double fold, or 1-inch single fold bias tape maker to make the 1/2-inch double fold bias. Hope that makes sense. Here you will see that I have actually, this is freshly made. I just made this bias tape, this double fold bias tape today, and I've wrapped it around some cardboard, and I just wanted you to see what a completed homemade version looks like. Okay, so here's what it looks like. And the great thing is, mostly when you buy it at the store, it just comes in solid colors, plain solid colors, which is fine, but it's also pretty stiff, and I don't really love it always stiff, and sometimes I really like to have this pop of color. So you can take any fabric that you have, any woven fabric that you have. This is 100% cotton. This is like a quilting cotton, and you can make your very own bias tape. And look how pretty it is. Imagine how that will accent something that I'm making. So let's get started. So that you can use any fabric that you have, just a random piece of fabric, however you want to do it. This is actually a fat quarter. I find that fat quarters are pretty fun. You can get a lot of really cool prints in them, and they're just easy to make. Let's talk about the fabric. We have a selvage end, which is this kind of machine finished end. Sometimes it has the name of the fabric or the company or even color codes. In fact, let me see. Here's a good example. You can see this owl fabric. This is the selvage. Now one side has all this printed stuff and the other side doesn't, but you can see that it is it's very machine finished, and this is the name of the designer and all your color codes, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so you'll see that is the selvage. On the other side of that, the other end of that doesn't have any markings on it at all, but you can definitely tell that it's the selvage. On the other side of the selvage, from here, with the way it's cut, we've got a cut edge. Okay, and we've got a cut edge here and here. So we're gonna lay our selvage edge here. The next thing we are going to do is we're going to look at the fabric itself. This is woven, like I said, 100% cotton, like quilting cotton. And if we pull it from selvage to selvage, you can see there's really not much stretch, just slight mechanical stretch. If we go from cut line along the selvage, we have no stretch at all. But how about if I grab it here and then grab this corner, check out the stretch we have there. That's the bias. So when you cut along the bias, you get more stretch in the fabric, which makes those curves being covered when you're using your bias tape, it makes those curves look smooth, okay? And they remain smooth. So no like folds in the bias tape or anything. It's just a nice, smooth piece of finished bias tape on your garment. So now that I've talked a lot, apologies for that, we're going to lay our fabric out. All right, now I'm going to take what I know this is the bias going this way, and I'm going to bring it like this. Okay, here we are. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut down this fold. Okay, then I'm going to cut this excess off here, and we're going to save that because we can use that for another project. So don't throw that away. Save those scraps. Now I'm going to fold it again. All right, so here's what we've got. All right, we've got a triangle here. So grab this point, and you're going to turn it this way. So you've got a 90-degree angle here. Try to match up your edges. Nice and matched up. If you need to do any trimming, let's do that. All right, so we've got our fabric here. I've lined it up to where we've got this 90-degree angle. And I'm going to get my ruler out. So we've got our fabric, we've got our ruler, and we've got our rotary cutter, and we're ready to go. Now, you can simply, if you like, you could simply take your whatever you're using to measure, measure over 2 inches. Now this is for 1 inch single fold binding or 1/2 inch double fold binding. That's what we're making here. You're going to use 2-inch strips, and you have a couple of choices. You can measure with the way I'm doing, and then use your rotary cutter. Okay, you can do that. Now, if you don't have to have this in order to do it. You can grab any type of measuring device and measure over 2 inches, and you can mark it. You can use a rotary cutter, or you can use scissors. I like using a rotary cutter because it's exact, but I know that not everyone has one, so it doesn't mean you can't make it if you don't have it. Okay, there's one. And now we're going to come over 2 more inches. Okay, now we're going to come over 2 more inches. Okay, now we're going to come over 2 more inches. It's pretty easy, right? So far, so good. And we're going to come over 2 more inches from there. And because this is just tiny and isn't even going to give us much of anything, we're going to discard that. And you can save it if you want to save scraps, because there's you got a couple triangle scraps. But we're going to set those to the side. Okay. Now we have multiple sheets, or strips I should say, of bias tape. And what you can see when you hold it up and you pull, you've got lots of stretch there. It's so awesome. Bias tape is really cool. So now, how do we connect all of these to make one continuous piece of bias tape? very good question. So what I do is I mix them all up. I don't want to do all the long pieces and then all the short pieces, because then I'm gonna have a bunch of seams at the end, like right next to each other, because this is a pretty short piece of fabric. So I like to mix it up, long and short. So I just separate them and kind of put them in a pile, and then it's kind of a random pick. Okay. What you're going to be tempted to do, let me grab a piece, is you're going to be tempted to line it up to where it matches. Okay, this is what you're gonna wanna do. You're gonna, because the first time I made bias tape, many moons ago, this is what I wanted to do here, and it did not make sense to me to do it any other way, but I was wrong. So let me pin this, and let's pretend that I've stitched that, okay? And so now I'm going to open it. Now look at what I have. I have a squared kind of corner. I have the V. That is not what we want, because what we want is we want it to be straight. So we're not going to do it that way. I know, gasp. So what we're going to do is we're still gonna match up the angles, except it's gonna go a little bit more like this. What you want is, you don't want it laying flat like this. You want it, you want to create a right angle here, a 90-degree angle. So you have, if you put this like this, you have a 90 degrees here. Do you see that? Now let me pin that as if I've stitched it, and let me show you the magic. Open it up, and voila, I have a straight piece of fabric. So each time that you add a new piece, you've got to make sure that you have a right angle here. I hope that that makes sense. So let me take it off, let me grab another piece of fabric. All right, so what we don't want to do is this. This is incorrect. What we do want to do is switch it around, do this. And you want to leave about 1/4 of an inch hanging off either end. Okay, that's what we want to do. So we're going to go to our sewing machine, and we are going to stitch with a 1/4 inch seam allowance across here. And then when we're done, we're going to make sure we trim off these little excess pieces. Okay, so let us do that. Here we've got our bias tape. It's not folded yet, but you can see I've got a seam here and a seam here, and it's perfectly straight. You're just going to keep doing that. Now we're going to take our bias tape maker, and we're going to place it like this, and we're going to have the wrong side up. Excuse me, can't talk today. And we're going to bring the point in first. If we take a look here, you can see there's more fabric on this side than on this side, and that is not what we want. We want it to, each side to have the same amount of fabric. So as you're starting, you just want to adjust it so that you've got the same amount of fabric on either side. Okay, now let's grab our iron. You can either pull your maker back or away so you can keep ironing, or you lift it up and you can pull the tape this way. Now you can see we've already begun our bias tape. This is 1 inch single fold bias tape. Okay, so you don't want to pull this out too far as you're making this, because then it'll flop open, and you don't want it to flop open. Okay, so once we get to where these seams are, let me pull this in a little bit. Just adjust it with your fingers, because it's a little bulky there because it's a seam, and it wants to stick out. So just take your time. Now, if you do what I did and you use a fat quarter for this, you're probably going to get over 4 yards of bias tape, just a single strip of bias tape if you use all of it, just like I just cut. So that's a lot of bias tape, and that's kind of fun. All right, now we have achieved single fold. All right, so now it's ready. You can use it just as it is, and notice how stretchy it is. It's so nice, I love it. But in order to make it double fold, we're going to fold it in half again. Now, if you look closely, you can see that I am folding it to where this top edge here is slightly, it's not right on top of the bottom edge, okay? So I'm just bringing it in just a little bit. giving it a good press. So you can see that it's just slightly, not at the edge, just slightly in a little bit. And we're going to do that all the way down the length of our bias tape. And once you've done this, you can wrap it around a piece of cardboard or fold it and pin it. You want to make sure that, you know, it's not going to like just be in a wad somewhere. So here's a piece of cardboard that I actually got from some bias tape that I bought at the store, and you'll just wrap it around. And that is honestly all there is to bias tape making. It's super easy, right? You could find your bias tape makers, a kit, or just individuals, bias tape makers based on size. You can find them anywhere, online, at your local fabric store. It's a very commonly used item, and it's fairly inexpensive. And we are done with our bias tape. So you can really use these to add a pop of excitement and color to whatever you're making, from a garment to a quilt or whatever. So yeah, there's our bias tape. I'm really glad you were here today, and I hope that you enjoyed this episode of Sewing School. If you did, I would love it if you subscribed below. We're trying to grow our family, our 5 out of 4 family, and grow this community, and we want you to be a part of it. So subscribe below, and I will see you next time on Sewing School. Bye.